The Tasmanian Black War, 1804 to 1830, from the Royal Historical Society of Queensland, May 23, 1968. The Australian Encyclopedia article on the Tasmanian Aborigines under the subheading titled The Black War informs us that an intelligent though primitive Tasmanians did not survive long the impact of white civilization. When the first settlement was made at Risdon Cove on the River Derwent, September 1803, few Tasmanians were seen, for at the time of the year they were in their hunting grounds in the Central Highlands. Early May 1804, however, a large party of men, women, and children driving a herd of kangaroos before them, as it was their practice in the hunting, made an appearance. Without provocation, the officer in charge, Lieutenant Bourne was absent, gave the order to fire, killing a number of Aborigines and wounding others. This was beginning with his term, the Black War. When the news of Brennan of Foray was conveyed to Lieutenant Governor Collins at Hobart Town on the other side of the Derwent, he was most disturbed and called for a full explanation for more. The latter made the excuse that a settler named Burt and his wife, whose shack was in the path of the natives, had been menaced and sought to protect him. The Tasmanians strongly resented the seizure of the open forest country, their best forest hunting ground, which early settlers occupied as sheep pastures. Then in 1805, there was a serious food shortage in the colony, and almost only meat attainable was theirs procured from the kangaroo hunting. Thus, in a short space of time, the Aborigines found themselves displaced from their favorite hunting grounds and their food supply seriously depleted. Most kangaroo hunters and stockmen were convicts, who were regarded as subhuman and treated them accordingly. It must not be overlooked that the settlement of Port Dampier in the mouth of the Tamar commenced on November 1804, which meant the white expansion was taking place simultaneously from both the north and the south of the island. Another disruptive factor in the lives of the Tasmanian was the activity of the whalers and sealers on the coast of Tasmania among the Bass Strait Islands. Whaling began on the straits about 1798, and by 1803 there was a resident population of islands of seamen, beachcombers, and time-inspired men, and runaway convicts, and anyone else had the ideal of out of sight, out of mind was attractive. There is little record of their activities as done of them, and had any wishes of these to be known. However, one thing is clear, that is that the sealers must have almost had the first to become in possession of native women for prostitution and slavery, and that most of the men had a plurality of women. On September 28, 1815, a Mr. W. Stewart made a report to the Colonial Secretary Campbell regarding the predatory boats off the coast of Tasmania and the ill treatment of native women used as slaves. And this pertinent passage from the report says, they, the Europeans, have also a custom of getting native women from the mainland amongst them, who they mostly attain by force and keep them as slaves as negroes, hunting and foraging for them, who transfer and dispose from one to another of their own property. Very few, whomever is seen their native home, being away for a number of years, if they do not comply with the desired orders in the hunting, etc., they, by way of punishment, have hanged them, cut off their heads with clubs in a shocking manner, or flogged them most unmercifully with cat made of kangaroo shrooms, and several have them have 6 or 7 women, whom they claim as their own private property in this manner. By 1830, the affected tribes became so seriously pleaded for their women that Robinson, a reconciler, could report that to the northeast, east of the line of Tamar to the Derwent, there were only 3 females among 72 males. The region was not accessible to the raided sealers on the west coast of the Arthur River, and the sex ratio was more or less normal. The removal of the females from the tribe must have been a continuing process, not so much so because of the changes among the sealers or the loss in the boat accidents, which could affect the sealers and the women more or less equally, but because of the greater contact of these women with European diseases. Others besides the sealer took possession of native women, but deprivations are likely to have been much less severe within those of the sealers. Disruption of family life by the removal of the women not only involved breaking down the family and the tribe, but also the loss of one of the sexes from the breeding population. The absence of a small number of children among the remnants of eastern tribe point clearly to the effect upon the breeding population. Even the half-calf population was kept at a low level in the straits, as sealers encouraged the abducted women to murder their children in infancy. Obvious reasons was that the woman with a nursing child was handicapped both for work and cohabitation. The effects of exotic disease has already been noted. Dr. Ptolemy suggested from an examination by Dr. Fazzini, later to feature in the Annals of Port Muscatine Northwest, and Robinson, description of the symptoms of course of the illness, that the cause of death was viral infection of the respiratory system, followed by bacterial infection of the plantonic organism, or alternately, a virulent pandemic infection. However, such diseases affect the population generally, not in special sections of it. It is less likely that the introduction of disease may have affected particularly the breeding population. This was venereal disease. Ptolemy finds it difficult to assess the importance of this disease among the Tasmanian. There are many references in Robinson's journal to the loathsome disease. Sir Grenfell Price, in his paper already states to refer that the sailors objected violently to the loss of their women, although in some cases they had so them riddled with syphilis that they were complete cripplets. And in the presence of venereal disease could have disposition to sterility, which caused the death of infants, children, and diseased parents. By this time, the expansion settlement was being hampered, not only completely frustrated. The muskets and pistols saw to that. However, the government was forced in November 1827 to take action to protect the settlers, providing army personnel to occupy the posts at strategic points. From hence, they could proceed swiftly to the aid of threatened settlers. And that this had become necessary appears to due to utter lack of resolution in handling the situation. The trials and execution of Mosquito, a Sydney-born Aboriginal who turned outlaw and formed his own tribe of Tasmanian, and Black Jack, a Tasmanian of the Mosquito Band, for the murder of William Howick, a stockman, in the case of the Mosquito, and Patrick MacArthur, a stockman, in the case of Black Jack. On 24th February 1825, and of Jack and Dick, two Tasmanians, for the murder of Thomas Coley, a stockman, on September 23rd, 1826. Had done little to inspire confidence in the native of the English system of justice, especially as the atrocities against them continued unabated and unchecked. At the end of November 1826, MacArthur issued another proclamation urging that anyone they need to capture certain natives who, making use of what they had learned in previous intercourse with the Europeans, said they'd be directing attacks upon the settlers. This had an effect of legalizing the attacks upon the natives. Of history of the Tasmanian Island has an apparently index entitled The Treatment of the Aborigines. It consisted of dispatch between Arthur and the Colonial Office, including reports and extract reports of Aboriginal Committee appointed by Arthur in 1830. The committee refers to frequent attacks made on the native by lawless and desperate characters for the purpose of carrying off native women and children, and attempts which, if resisted, the aggressors did not scruple to accomplish with the circumstances of dreadful and unnecessary barbarity. It's the application of this assertion. The committee cannot but mention one fact which, from its atrocities, would have been compared to them perfectly incredible, had it not been confirmed by the testimony which they cannot doubt. A person named Carrots, since dead, has known to have boasted of killing a native. In his attempt to carry off his wife, he cut off the dead man's head and obliged the woman to go with him, carrying it to suspend her around her neck. Man said, it has been clearly informed that they, the stockkeepers, were in the habit of emasculating the men that they might attain undisputed possession of their gens, wives, and their murderous conflict took place between them chiefly on this account. So the Tasmanian government, under Arthur, amounted to set up a reservation, but attempts at reservation failed because of his ability to contain them. As Petoni said, all this was meaningless to the native, but it gave settlers more and more freedom to murder them and do everything they could to wipe them out. It pleased the consciousness of the rulers. After passing martial law, efforts were made to capture the chiefs and the warriors of the tribe. Parties of civilians, aided by soldiers, scoured the bush for natives. If the latter were found, their treatment depended on the leader of the hunting party hunting them. In cases, they were all shot or brained by musket butts. Other than more merciful leaders captured them and brought them to Hobart to await disposal by Executive Council. The latter leaders include Gilbert Robertson and John Batman, the founder of Melbourne, and years later, whose humanity was in work upon a time as subsequence. Unfortunately, on the principle, one cannot make an omelet without breaking the egg. The captures were, in many cases, effected after there, and have been some casualties suffered by the neighbors. In 1829, the Aborigines adopted a new system of revenge. It was generally believed they was taught by some runaway convicts to destroy by fire the stacks of the houses of the settlers. They occasionally burned standing ripe crops. Finally, the Tasmanian government cannot take it by putting 3,000 soldiers in the field with the population to go just sense of killing around of native Aborigines. But this lost because the native Aborigines would slip through the files, and it was just a wasted operation of money and time and effort. But during this, they committed illicit atrocities. Even through the work of conciliation and then proceeded peace, Robinson could not be everywhere it was once. At 1830, it saw its quota of settlers murdered by natives. As a matter of interest, the official record from 1830 to 1831, taken from West History in the appendix, the captured natives between 1830 and 1835 totaled 200. Prior to 1831, no record had been preserved. They were taken to the first gun carriage island, but this proving unsuitable, an establishment was set up Welby and Flanders Island, where they remained to 1847, when the 45 then remaining were brought to Oyster Bay near Hobart. That the final decline in extinction was rapid, and it was evident. And it's just a very sad story of the genocide. It just kept going. We must not forget that we should never forget the genocide of black people. Despite all this sorry, sad story, we must not forget that looking after a century and increasingly liberal ideas in relation to race and color through the kaleidoscope of those same ideas, the brutishness of the British of the 18th and early 19th century, their state of fear was no means exclusive to their nation, was in relations with the alleged inferior races. Their own people who lacked position, money, and power or authority could be treated in the same way, referred to the man who beat Napoleon and his marshal of the scum of the earth. And liberals had to fight to get women and children out of coal mines and other lethal occupations. Therefore, in the context of what happened to the Tasmanians, is unusual. A race that has been enjoying such sports as bear baiting, cockfighting, will place very value on the lives of what appear to be subhuman species, less than animals, especially when their own lives are held in small account by their fellows. But even after a century of exposure to liberal ideas, has the white race advanced so much? The race problem today is persistent and disturbing and is disheartening on aspect. The brave Negro race has merely earned contempt of both. No present answers appear to exist. Perhaps one day some governments will be brave enough to attempt to give more than lip service to the idea of racial integration. In the meantime, what's going on despite protestation to the contrary attempts to want to consider the things in the light of old Italian proverb? It was on Bruny Island, April 4th, 1829, Trini was a female 16 years age, destined to be the last of her race to live her life in Tasmania, and devoted ally of Robinson and of the next 6 years. She also suffered from the tragedies of her race. The whites had murdered her relatives and infected her with syphilis. Even after death, tragedy pursued her, and despite promises to sink her body in the deep waters of the Birch Bay, her skeleton is now an anatomical specimen in Hobart Museum. That's how they got down. And that's how they committed the genocide that really is talked about in history books. Even over there in Australia and Tasmania, they really even talk about it. Hey, subscribe to the channel. Much love to y'all. You know what I'm saying? Keep your head up, keep this history moving, and keep it going. Peace and have a wonderful.